or what are you trying to hold on to that God might be asking you to release? What lot are you still carrying that's keeping you from hearing God clearly?
Thank you for tuning in to the Queen's Court podcast, a space curated for women by women. Here we celebrate empowerment, faith, sisterhood, and growth. So pull up a seat, settle in, and let's step into the rain room together.
So, welcome back to the Queen's Court, the space curated for women by women, where faith, growth, and sisterhood all come together. I'm so glad that you guys have joined me today because we're going to talk about something that isn't always easy, but it's always necessary, and that is pruning. In my inaugural podcast, I briefly spoke about my pruning season. I had several women reach out to me who wanted me to kind of unpack it. They wanted to know how I navigated through these times, how I overcame some of the situations that I was in. And so I'm going to just briefly touch on those things. When we talk about the pruning season, or actually just pruning in general, what I want us to do first is just kind of look at it from a gardening perspective, right? Stick with me, the way that a gardener prunes a tree is the same way that God prunes us. And just like there are three main cuts of pruning, or three main types of pruning cuts, I've realized that in my own life, I've gone through each of these type of cuts. And while, as I stated in episode 1, pruning hurts like hell in the moment, they also prepared me for the growth that I see today, right? So ride with us, sister, okay? Just give me a minute. The first type of cut is called a removal cut. And when I think about the removal cut, I think about letting go, right? So this type of cut is when the gardener takes out an entire branch. So usually it's because it's diseased, dead, or just growing in the wrong direction. In life, removal cuts feel like those times when God pulls people, habits, or situations out of our lives completely. And I'll be honest with you, letting go of relationships was hard for me. Not because I have to be in one, but because I genuinely love companionship. Because truth be told, like, I enjoy me. I'm actually pretty daggone dope. But when I'm thinking about those relationships that I was in during this pruning season, I think about the red flags that I ignored, like completely ignored. So this looks like for me, the times when I thought that I could change people, when I thought that I could help people see how dope I was. And when things didn't work out, I I I'm so grateful because God was always there to comfort me. He reminded me that even though in that moment I felt lonely, I was never alone. One day, a friend of my sister-in-law, she told me something that I never forgot. She said, "Everyone can't go where God is trying to take you." And that made perfect sense to me. And it actually reminded me of the story of Abraham and Lot because yeah, if you don't know the story, here's just a quick rundown of how the story goes in the Bible, right? But you can read it later on. But the story of Abraham and Lot. So Abraham had a promise from God. God promised him land, descendants, and blessings, right? But he told Abraham to take his family meaning his wife and his daughters. Well, along the way, he brought his nephew Lot with him, right? And so for a while, things was cool. Everything was working out. But soon the land couldn't support both of them because each of them had like a lot of livestock. So the herdsmen started arguing. They had their chests all poked out and puffed up. And Abraham was just like, look, man, like we gonna have to go our separate ways. So what you want to do? You want to go left? Because if you go left, then I'm going to go right. But if you go right, then I'm going to go left. So what's up? What we doing, right? So in thinking about that, like, here's the part that gets me because once Lot left, Then God spoke to Abraham again. And after the separation, God reminded him of the promise and even gave him a clearer vision of what was ahead. Did you get that? Yep. So the clarity came after the pruning. So he didn't get a clearer vision until after Lot had left. That's how it is for us. Like, we do the same thing. We carry everybody with us into the next season. Like, we got friends of friends, we got family, we got coworkers, we even got old habits that we trying to carry into the next season. But the truth is, again, not everything or everyone can go. Some people are tied to your past season, but not your future calling. So we got to make sure that we remember that. And listen, it doesn't mean that these people are bad people, because Lot wasn't evil. You know, the Bible actually refers to him as being a righteous man. He just wasn't assigned to Abraham's promise. And that's the same for us, because some people aren't meant to walk with us into the next level. And that's okay. So let me ask you this. Who or what are you trying to hold on to that God might be asking you to release? What lot are you trying to still carry that could be keeping you from hearing God clearly? Just something to think about, right? So when I think about that story again, what it taught me is that not everyone, like, no, that I have to stop carrying extra stuff or extra anything extra. Like, I can't carry anything extra that wasn't part of my assignment, because sometimes, like I said in episode 1, the removal, when God removes stuff from our lives, it isn't punishment. It's just so that he can protect our path. So, when in thinking about that, think about why sometimes we're afraid. Like, are we afraid because it feels like a loss? And I know for me, when I was going through that season, it was hard because, in going back to the image that I gave of the little girl with the bear. Like, she didn't want to relinquish it because she thought that she was going to lose. But what if the loss isn't really a loss? What if it's just making room for something bigger? Or what if it's making room for a gain? What if the vision can't come into focus until the pruning happens? Again, just something to think about. So, when I spoke about pruning in episode 1, I also talked about the relationships that I lost. I talked about the friends, the family, the marriage. And when I think about the male companion, I've always been the type of person to put all my eggs in one basket. I mean, to each their own, right? What I mean by that is that if I met someone and I liked them and I felt like what we had, we had the potential to be something more, then I was all in. And so I was never the woman who dated several or multiple men at one time. One, because I was too emotional. I My feelings got involved, like, way too quick. And for me, I'm like, gosh, if I like them both, then how do I how do I separate that? So, I would just it would just be, if it was somebody that I met and I liked them, it was me and him. So when those relationships didn't work out, it was rough because I didn't have a plan B. When it came time to let go, sometimes it was hard because I found, I would sometimes find myself going back and forth because it was comfortable. And if I didn't have a plan B, then there was nothing to distract me from plan A. So again, if it was comfortable, so there was, a little back and forth. But other times I was like, shit, I'm good. And I never looked back. But in those hard times, one of the things that made it easy for me was just praying. I would pray and ask God for the strength not to go back. I would stay busy. If I wasn't working, then I was going to school. I would hang out with my friends and just anything to try to stay active. But most of all, what I did was just pray and ask God to strengthen me in those seasons. That was my pruning. Like I said, it was painful at the time, but it was so necessary for where I am now. The second type of cut is the reduction cut. And this is when you think about a reduction cut, I want you to think about scaling back, right? So this isn't about where the first one was about taking a whole branch. This isn't about taking a whole branch. It's about trimming it back so that the tree can grow healthier and in a more balanced way. This one right here, when I thought about it and how to relate it to me personally, it was definitely personal. For years, I used to always say yes to anything and everything that people asked me to do. And what I found was I never got that same energy in return. As givers, we can give and give and give until we are absolutely depleted. And takers, they'll take and take until there's absolutely nothing left. And then they'll move on to the next person, right? That's when I started asking the question, who recharges the charger? Because if you're constantly pouring out, but you're never being poured back into, eventually you're going to burn out. And when I think about it, I always use the analogy of, the plane and the flight attendant. So when the flight attendant tells you to put your oxygen mask on first before helping anyone else, why do you suppose she's telling you that? It's because if you pass out trying to help someone else, then you're no good to them and you definitely no good to yourself either. So, um, I've learned, and I'm still learning though, because, sometimes I'll still say yes to things that I should say no to, but I am learning to, definitely not pour so much of myself into people in situations where I am not being, replenished. So, that that's what reduction felt like in my life. So learning that boundaries are not me, it's not me being selfish. It's there for survival. Sometimes scaling back is the only way to protect your ability to keep growing and to keep giving. So I want you to just think about where where might you need to trim back in your life so that you can stay healthy. The last type of cut that gardeners use is called a heading cut or heading cut. And this cut encourages new growth. So when I think about this last cut, they said that this is when the gardener snips part of the branch, not to remove it, but to encourage like new buds to sprout and to grow fuller when they come in. This one kind of hit home for me as well because when I'm thinking about the heading cut, these are uncomfortable seasons where God pulls us out of our comfort zones. For me, it looked like being um, cut back in one area so that I could step into something brand new. The podcast would have been definitely something that I never saw coming, right? Or would have been that new thing for me. And or either going back into leadership after saying that I will, like I was never going back, but that's really where my heart is in helping people. So those would have been two of the situations where, he had me step outside of my comfort zone. It wasn't easy. And honestly, it kind of felt like a setback at first, but God was really shaping me for greater fruit. What felt like being cut down was actually the setup for growth that I never saw coming. What helped me through the pruning season, because that was one of the things that I got an email and a question about was what helped me during my pruning season. Well, first, as I've stated several times, I stayed in prayer, honey. When I tell you I had never prayed so much in my life, and I would talk to God like he was sitting right next to me. I cried those ugly cries, knowing, that it was just him and me. And it was, like a Planet Fitness. It was a judgment free zone, So I did. I poured it all out to God during those times. I also kept a journal. And remember, I mentioned this in episode 1 too. I had the straightening my crown journal, but also one of the biggest outlets for me was poetry. So not only did I keep a journal, but I started writing poetry. Um, let me say I started writing it more frequently, and it was on deeper levels than what I had previously done, like when I was younger or in high school. So, I wrote stories and the stories turned into books. So writing for me became a necessary outlet. It was a safe place because I could pour out all my fears, my frustrations, and my hopes in the same space. So I still write and journal to this day. Um, and I remember even, writing some when when I would be in those situations that were very hurtful and I would pour that stuff out on paper. I would look on, on not online because I don't even know if I was online then, but I would hear people talk about, like these poetry nights. And so I would go to poetry nights and I would just recite it because it was a release, it was a way for me to release those things that I had bottled up inside. So like I said, I still write to this day. I also found scriptures to stand on. I had a prayer closet and I would go into the closet, I would just pray. But I wrote the prayers down on paper, wrote scriptures down, and I would actually just tape them to the wall inside the closet. And one of the scriptures that I would stand on was John 15:2, where Jesus says that every branch that bears fruit still gets pruned so that it can bear more fruit, right? And then Jeremiah 29:11 was another one of my favorites, for I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. And man, when I tell you that when you find yourself in when you find yourself some scripture to stand on, you feel like you can conquer the world. And that is the absolute truth because I can't begin to tell you how many times I felt defeated, depleted, just everything. But once I found those scriptures and I started reciting those over and over to myself, they did give me like an unspeakable strength that I mean, it's hard to describe. And the last thing that I did was I shifted my perspective. I used to ask God, why me, but I stopped asking why and started saying, like, be it unto me, like Mary did. And I would also ask, okay, Lord, so what are you making room for? Because I knew that when he took something away, that he was going to replace it or he was going to give me something better. So it's kind of like, well, what are you making room for? Right. So that was the last thing, was just shifting your perspective because your perspective is your reality, right? Um so when you think about this cut, um could it be that the cutback you're feeling right now is really the start of something new? And if so, I would say like don't lean away from it, like lean into it. Like he got you. So, in closing, you guys, we've walked through all three cuts that gardeners use. We walked through the removal cut, the reduction cut, and the heading cut. Each one of these has a purpose. And just like, the gardener prunes with a vision of the tree's future, God prunes us with with the same vision or same thing in mind. So it's not punishment, it's preparation. And like I said, it's all in how you look at things. So if you look at pruning from the perspective of this is not a punishment for me, like this is preparation, it's God's way of making sure that you grow stronger, you grow healthier, and that you're ready to bear more fruit, right? Thinking about Abraham, Abraham had to let Lot go in order to step into the fullness of what God had for him. And you may have to do the same. So, what I want to encourage you today is again, don't fight the pruning process. Trust it, because on the other side of letting go, there's promise, there's clarity, and there's purpose waiting for you. So, maybe you're in your own pruning season right now. Maybe you've lost people. Maybe you're, letting go of old ways. Maybe life just doesn't look like the way that you thought it would, right? I just want to encourage you, hold on, like do not quit. Whatever you do, don't quit. Trust the process. Like they said, trust him even when you can't trace him, right? Because if God did it for me, like he can and will surely do it for you. Like I believe that with everything in my spirit. Looking back now, I realized that, like I said, every cut was necessary. Every no was for my protection. Every goodbye was making room for a better hello. And I wouldn't trade it because pruning wasn't the end for me. It was the beginning. So, sis, hear me when I say everyone can't go where God is trying to take you, and that's okay. Trust the pruning because on the other side of the cut is a crown, a promise, and a purpose that you can't even imagine, right? Thank you guys for sitting with me in the rain room today. In this episode, if it spoke to you, like take a moment and journal about it. Write down the areas of your life where God may be pruning you, or um, who or what do you need to release, so that you can grow? Like, write that down. And if you found encouragement here, share the episode with a friend who might be in their pruning season. Because remember, everyone can't go where God is trying to take you, but the journey ahead is so worth it.
Thank you for joining us in the Queen's Court today. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and download so you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep reigning with purpose and walking in power.